I went to DAS for starting in senior kindergarten or grade 1. I'm not sure which. I remember 2 classrooms that I'm sure I was in for multiple years and at multiple times. I think that what I remember now versus what I would say I remembered prior to seeing the film is different, because it's brought back a lot of memories. I remember having our parents in at the end and hanging our work up all on the ceiling and walking around and trying to find, you know, my work to show my parents. There was an area that had building materials, and I know that I and a number of other children really enjoyed creating these incredibly elaborate structures and then preventing anyone from getting near them.
You guys, we have to break it apart. Why? Because, and I'm going to eat the berries.
Because they had to stay there until the end of the day. That was very important. Even if you built them at 9 o'clock in the morning, they'd better still be there at, 3, which was not the easiest thing to accomplish, but we were set on it.
A castle.
I remember a lot of incidents. I remember mostly times that I got in trouble or there was some form of altercation.
How. To do. To.
Naomi had fallen. I had thought it was amusing.
You all right?
More importantly, other people had thought it was amusing.
I know.
So I tried to recreate it.
Why don't you just sit down again?
Okay, we have to clean up everyone. Jessica, this sounds nice.
The chair pull didn't matter to me. I remembered what happened afterwards, and that was always what stuck with me.
What just happened over here?
Jessica.
What just happened over here?
And it wasn't until Naomi got angry at me for having done it later that I remember that, because that was negative emotions for me. And then subsequently I chased her around with a pair of scissors and tried to cut her hair. So that, to me, that was the culmination of that event. So I didn't really remember the chair pull because it was just the tiny catalyst to a much larger and more emotionally fraught saga of events.
Why did you start feeling this way?
School was a very safe place to be. My other friends who went to different schools didn't agree with that. They'd say they didn't want to go to school, they didn't like going to school, they'd complain. There was a boy who lived on my street who hated going to school every time, and I had no idea why he felt this way, because for me school was fantastic. It was, it was a safe place, it was a caring place. I got to do what I wanted. I was supported in what the kinds of things I wanted to do. My friends basically were always complaining about the types of things they had to do and how they would be forced to, practice writing their letters, and that they would be forced to write out sentences. And a lot of the things that they talked about were the same things that I did in school. I remember doing them, or it was something I'd done in the week before we'd talked about it. But for me, it wasn't something that had been forced. It was a much more, well, do you want to do this? Would you like to do this? How, if you don't want to do this, why don't you want to do this? And how can we make this a better, experience for you, which clearly my friends did not have. Peacemaking was something that we did. That's all. I don't remember it being introduced. It was just something that happened.
Do you agree to solve it with Anne or the peacemaker?
Occasionally, something would happen. We would have a dispute, and before we were allowed to go talk to our teachers, we had to have a peacemaking. More often than not, I had done something, and one of my fellow students was dragging me over to the peacemaker so that we could resolve whatever this was. So that was really it was just a fact of life.
Midori, why did you feel sad? Because I'm a little mixed up.
The peacemaking mentality was something that was very internalized. I don't remember there being an alternative, so I assume it worked. In that, to me, that was, how you solved problems.
Handshake.
It was the process of how you deal with conflict. There are ways to solve conflicts and avoid large, outbursts. There are two sides to an issue, that you can feel strongly about something, but someone else can also feel just as strongly. It was more the mindset than the process itself. I mean, it was a really great process, but I wasn't aware of it as being a process. But it was more the fact that everyone did it, everyone understood it, and everyone bought into it that really made it work. It was also the involvement. Things happened, like you spoke, your peers spoke, the peacemakers spoke. There wasn't this sense of, outside punishment being imposed on you. So you couldn't really rebel against it because you'd been part of it. The solution or the consequence or whatever it was that ultimately occurred at the end was something you yourself had agreed to. If I did get into something with someone, if I had an argument, if I had a dispute, I sort of unconsciously mirrored the peacemaking process. I think I was made sure to listen to the other side. I would ask questions. I would just, have the same sort of attitude as we had during peacemaking, and I think this helped in, the following years to lessen the amount of disputes that I had. We were there to learn. That was why we were there. And at no point do I remember and yelling at us for not listening or something. It was more of an innate attitude, which was that we would learn. We were there to learn. That was why we were there. So, of course, clearly that was the right thing to do, was to be in class and to listen and to go along with things. Because even if you didn't understand it at the moment, at some point in the future, things would become clear. So it was almost, I guess, trust. By the time I started thinking about being a teacher, I hadn't had that for a number of years. And I had teachers who tried to exert their authority in overt ways. And I think that part of deciding to become a teacher was realizing that to be a teacher, I didn't have to be the kind of person I'd had as teachers for a lot of my schooling. When I think back to who I feel were my best teachers in my best years, it's not necessarily a teacher that fits into most people's view of the education system. And I think that that's had a lot of effect on, first, my reluctance to become a teacher, and then sort of what I've viewed as how I want to be as a teacher. We trusted our teachers that even though nothing made sense at the beginning when we started learning things, that it ultimately would. There was a reason why right now we weren't supposed to be playing with the blocks on the carpet, even though that's what we wanted, and right now it was probably a good idea to sit down and write out our thoughts. And if you really didn't like doing that, you could do something else, or you could write less, or you could draw a picture, or you could tell the story. But if you did enjoy it, if you just gave it a chance and figured out if you enjoyed it, then it was great. And, that's not necessarily even something that it just applies to 6-year-olds. It can continue to apply all the way up the line. A lot of what appealed to me about university was the same, being able to choose how I was going to learn, being able to decide, what kinds of projects I was going to do. It was about the flexibility, about being able to choose the way I wanted to learn. And by my 4th year, it was, I loved it. I loved going to university. In some ways, I'll probably go to university for the rest of my life, continuing to do additional qualifications and other things like that. And of course, I'm going to be in an institution of some sort, be it a school or a university or something like that for hopefully forever. So, there must be something about school that appeals to me. I was so pleased to get into the Regent Park program. Everyone was, saying, like, you're nuts, this is going to be the weirdest thing you're ever going to do, you're going to get shot, all sorts of terrible things, but it was amazing. And again, the people, I didn't really hang on to any of the friendships I'd made in my undergrad. The people I'd met at at U of T were, not necessarily the kind of people I would want to know for the rest of my life, whereas some of the people from the Regent Park program, I'm hoping, that 20 years from now, we're still going to be talking about our teaching experiences and coming back, and it was an incredible program from that point of view. And of course, our teachers, our professors were amazing. When she came in, she said that she was going to show us a video about peacemaking. And I was thinking, peacemakers. We had a program called Peacemakers when I was that age. Yeah, it was funny. And so I went over to her and kind of as a joke was sort of like, I actually went to a school that also had something called peacemaking, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, what was it called? And I said, oh, it's called DAS. And she was like, well, that's what we're going to be showing. It was weird because there was a disconnect, I guess, in that when I'd seen it before, I'd seen it with my peers. I'd seen it with people who were also in it, who'd been there, and their parents, and other people who were connected to the school and who understood the process. And also, I'd seen it through a 10-year-old's eyes. And so to see it again but from the perspective of it being something educational, as from being something that other people could learn from, were in fact expected to learn from, was very interesting, actually. It certainly was not a lens that I'd looked through before, because it was just something that had happened, something we'd done. It was something that I'd been a part of, and that was in my past. And now to think of it as being still relevant, something, and often after, as we were talking about it, Esther kept saying things like, this is something that still doesn't really exist in that many schools. People kept working on it. It was a process. So to me, it was not outdated, but something that was from the past, and perhaps we'd built on it and found something better. And so to learn that it was something that was still not even realized in schools, and that it was the future rather than the past, was very enlightening, I think. And I think it certainly affected the way that I'd been thinking about teaching.